All right, let's get right into it. We're about to talk about one of the most incredible engineering projects in all of human history, but it's also one of its greatest tragedies. This is the story of the Panama Canal, the deadliest shortcut ever built. So, our story really kicks off with this guy, Ferdinand de Lesseps. And you have to understand, this man was a national hero in France. He was the genius who just pulled off the Suez Canal. So in 1881, when he stood up and made this epic promise to do it all over again in Panama, yeah, the world absolutely believed he could. Why wouldn't they? But that promise, well, it came with a cost that is just staggering to think about. Before this canal was even close to being done, something like 25,000 people would lose their lives. This wasn't just some big construction project. It was a full-blown human catastrophe on an epic scale. So the big question is, how did it all go so horribly wrong? Well, de Lesseps had this incredible, bold vision, but it had a fatal flaw. He basically wanted to copy and paste his plan from the deserts of Egypt and drop it right into the treacherous jungles of Panama. And that's where everything fell apart. See, the Suez Canal, it was basically a long ditch dug through flat, dry sand. It was a pretty straightforward plan, and it worked like a charm. But Panama, oh, Panama was a whole different beast. We're talking mountains, solid rock, and just an insane amount of rain. Trying to dig a sea-level canal there was, well, it was basically impossible. But de Lesseps was so sure of himself, he just refused to see it. So the French effort became less of a construction project and more of an all-out war. A war against the jungle itself. And they were fighting on 3 fronts, against 3 brutal enemies. First up, you had the environment. Can you even imagine 10 feet of rain every single year? The main river, the Chagres, would just explode into this raging torrent. The ground would turn to soup, and you'd get these massive, deadly mudslides that would just swallow men and millions of dollars of equipment, sometimes literally overnight. But as bad as the mud was, the second enemy was way, way deadlier: disease. At its absolute peak, 200 workers were dying every single month. And the terrifying part? No one knew why. They had no idea that tiny mosquitoes were carrying yellow fever and malaria. The saying on the ground was grim. A man could be perfectly healthy at breakfast and be dead by dinner time. The whole project turned into this horrible conveyor belt of death. You'd have ships pulling into the harbor packed with fresh, hopeful laborers, mostly from the Caribbean, and right next to them, another ship would be loading up with coffins for the trip back home. It was just this constant, brutal cycle. So after 8 long years, the whole thing just collapsed. The final toll was devastating. Over 22,000 people were dead. The canal itself, barely a third of the way done. The company went bankrupt, and it completely wiped out the life savings of 800,000 French investors. It was an absolute unmitigated failure. But the dream of a canal, that didn't die with the French. About a decade later, a new player enters the scene: America, led by the one and only Theodore Roosevelt. He saw the canal as crucial for American naval power. But there was a catch. Panama wasn't its own country. It was part of Colombia, and Colombia said no deal. Roosevelt's response? Well, it was as simple as it was ruthless. I mean, just look at how fast this all went down. It's wild. In November 1903, a group of Panamanian rebels declare independence. Almost at the exact same moment, U.S. warships just happened to show up, blocking any Colombian troops from intervening. And then, get this, just 2 weeks later, the brand new nation of Panama signs a treaty giving the U.S. total control of the canal zone forever. It was basically a manufactured revolution. Okay, so now the Americans had the land, but more importantly, they had learned from every single one of the French mistakes. They knew that before they moved a single shovel of dirt, they had to win a totally different kind of battle first. They had to go to war with the mosquito. And the man for that job was Colonel William Gorgas. His plan was just brilliant in its simplicity and scale. He put together what was essentially a sanitation army, 4,000 people, and they went to work. They drained swamps, they covered every puddle of standing water with oil to kill the mosquito larvae, and they fumigated every single building in the entire zone. It was an all-out public health assault. And the results? Honestly, they were nothing short of miraculous. In just 2 years, yellow fever, the disease that had been a death sentence for thousands, was completely gone, vanished from the canal zone. It's still considered one of the greatest public health triumphs in human history. Just incredible. So, with the workers finally safe from disease, the Americans could get to the real work, the engineering. And they had a totally different, game-changing plan. They weren't going to make the same mistake as the French. Instead of trying to dig through the mountains, they came up with an ingenious way to lift ships up and over them. The idea was pure genius. They dammed the Chagres River to create a huge artificial lake right in the middle of the country. Then, they built a series of massive locks that worked like a giant water elevator. A ship would come in, the locks would lift it 85 feet up to the level of the lake, it would sail across, and then another set of locks would lower it back down to the ocean on the other side. Now, that doesn't mean the digging stopped. Oh no. The Culebra Cut, this 8-mile trench they had to carve through the mountains, was an absolute beast of a job. Thousands of guys with dynamite and steam shovels moved, get this, 211 million cubic yards of rock and dirt. The scale is just mind-boggling. And you can see the engineering brilliance in the tiny details. Take the lock gates. Each one of these massive steel doors weighed 745 tons, but they were so perfectly balanced that a tiny 40-horsepower motor, we're talking about the size of an engine in a small car, could swing them open and closed. It's just incredible precision. And so, finally, after 10 years of American muscle and ingenuity, and more than 30 years after de Lesseps first made his promise, the canal was finished. It was ready. But its grand opening was overshadowed by the enormous human cost and, as it turned out, a brand new world war. When you put the two attempts side by side, the story is crystal clear. The French, totally blinded by their success at Suez, charged ahead and lost around 22,000 lives for nothing. The Americans, on the other hand, studied those failures, adapted, and succeeded, though still at the cost of about 5,000 more lives. Their victory really came down to two things the French didn't have: a ruthless political game, and a flexible scientific way of solving problems. So the very first ship sailed through the Panama Canal on August 15, 1914. You'd think there would have been massive celebrations, right? One of the greatest achievements in human history. But there was almost nothing. The world's attention was completely focused on Europe, where World War I had just begun. Fast forward to today. Thousands of ships use that canal every year. It carries something like 5% of all global trade. But every single one of those ships is sailing over the unmarked graves of the tens of thousands who died to build it. And it really makes you wonder, right? As we all benefit from this incredible shortcut, have we completely forgotten the price that was paid?